Welcome to Press Start Mzansi, the podcast where innovation, business, policy, and play converge. I am your host, Bandile Phuthuma, and today we are speaking with a pioneer who is helping build the foundation of South Africa's gaming ecosystem from the ground up. Joining me as a host for this episode is Kieren Reid, and our guest is Raymond Ledwaba, the CEO of ITTHYNK Gaming. Welcome, my good man.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bandile. Yes, I'm Kieren Reid, and I'm really excited to be talking to Ray today. Ray, you are building communities, you're building games, you're building people, you're just doing everything. And it's so amazing to have you here and to get a chance to kind of talk with you. I loved your book, by the way.
Thank you very much.
I think before we get into like the strategy and the nitty-gritty, because we really want to talk about your ethos and thinking about how we build this community, I want to get a sense of how you got into games, because I know you're a finance man, you're like a strategy man. So what drew you to games, and how did you like find yourself in that space?
Hi, everyone. My name is Raymond Ledwaba. I am the CEO of ITTHYNK Group, and ITTHYNK is a technology business that is made up of ITTHYNK Smart Solutions, a company that builds software and provides consultancy services in the tech space. We started ITTHYNK Gaming 4 years ago with the desire and the ambition to build a video game development business that would tell African stories through the medium of video games. I got into the gaming space by accident, or coincidence, or serendipity. I don't know which one it is. I run a nonprofit company called Disky 99, and we do sports for development programs. So in 2020, before COVID, we had a netball tournament in Soweto that got cut by lockdowns. And, during that program, we had to figure out what we could do with young people who were not playing netball and participating in active sports. We wanted them to still do sports in a safe environment where there isn't physical contact. And we stumbled onto esports. And we hosted an esports tournament. And during this esports tournament, when my team and I were doing research, we discovered the world of video games. We discovered how massive the industry is, that video games are the biggest entertainment medium on earth, and yet Africans do not play a role in producing video games, but we are heavily involved in consumption of games. So I wanted to create a game that young people could play that was built by Africans. And naively, I thought, we'll build a gaming company. And this is how I am here 4 years later, having this conversation with these amazing gentlemen about like how this gaming ecosystem, the gaming industry in South Africa on the continent could grow, how it could create a platform for young people to be involved in the making of games, how young people could upskill themselves in this mixed medium of technology, art, creativity, entertainment, education, all manner of things in the, attempt to create an ecosystem and an industry that could entertain people around the world with our stories. That's my context. That's my background. By training, I'm a chartered accountant, so very finance-oriented. I worked in a bank, worked in an audit firm, and now I'm building my own business, and it's interesting and challenging and fun.
I want you, Raymond, to touch on the gaps that you might have identified. You've spoken a lot about the ecosystem and all that. I would like you to touch a little bit on the gaps that you might have stumbled across in the gaming ecosystem, and also the challenges. What are the challenges in building in this kind of a business?
Yeah, I think, there's many gaps. The biggest one, obviously, is the lack of Africans building games, right, that are commercially viable. That gap is a result of many things. It's a result of no policies from a government perspective that takes the industry as a massive economic driver, because, government officials might not understand what this industry is all about. They might also have a lot of biases that come from their kids maybe playing games a lot, and they're worried that games are addictive, and they don't understand the other aspects of games in terms of how games can be used for young kids to learn about programming, to be creative, etc., right? And how they could also make their own games and make a living, either developing their own games or playing games. So that's the first gap that I think has resulted in us being where we are. Secondly, on the African continent in general, we've got a unique dynamic where there's a lot of broken ecosystems, right? From the funding landscape not having conducive financial instruments that can be used to support young people in business. Whether their business is creative, it's technology or whatever, that funding challenge is a big one, because if people don't have capital to build and continue building, it's a problem for sustainability, right? So that's the second issue. The third issue, I would say, is a skills issue. A skills issue from, if you look at young people entering the space, there's not a lot of educational institutions, and I know Kieren worked at one, right, where these educational institutions take gaming seriously to the extent of making programs available to train young people from start to finish in the art, science of making games. That's the first part. So we don't have educational institutions that are creating pipeline of young, skilled workers that will make the games. Secondly, the skills deficit is as a result of no big studios in the continent. So we don't have really huge, commercially successful enterprises that we could call corporates, or even medium-sized businesses that make games on a commercial basis and they're sustainable. What that creates, if you don't have these companies, what it creates is that you don't get a lot of senior talent that then leave these corporates to start their own businesses. And when they start their own businesses, they've shipped a commercially successful game, they've made money, they know how to market it, how to promote it, how to distribute it. They know the start to end and the whole life cycle of making games. And if you don't have the senior talent, then you have an industry full of juniors. And if you have an industry full of juniors, then you need to ensure that these juniors are equipped and they can be, supported with an environment where they can be allowed to fail. And I would say that's the last gap I want to talk about, which is attitude, tolerance, and acceptance of what failure is in business. In South Africa and on the continent, I think, and I'll speak mostly about South Africa because that's where my lived experience comes from, we do not have an appetite for failure in this country, where it is not seen as failure in business, but it's seen as more, you are learning how to do things better. And if you are not being supported to start initiatives and continue and learn and pivot, then you will not have an industry to speak about. Because once someone starts and make a game and they fail or the game doesn't succeed, if they are not going to be supported to the next step of saying, oh, do you know why your game failed? You need to make another one. Why didn't people play your game? Why couldn't you build a community? What were the lessons? And if this young person can't say, oh yeah, I figured out A, B, C, and D. Now I know how to do things differently. Can I be supported? If there's no support, what will happen is this young person is going to try do something else. I mean, they can try and make a second game or a third game, but eventually, I had this young person come to our office this one time, and they said, my parents are telling me I'm 25 years old and I need to now find a real job. And you can see this young person has the passion. They've been trying to do this. They went to school. They actually have a qualification in game development. And their games are not successful yet. And now their parents are saying, you need to be an adult. You need to get a real job, right? And so there's no support at home. There's no support outside home. You can guess what's going to happen with this young person. They are definitely leaving the industry to do something else.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that so much with our students when I was teaching at WITS, is that they end up in other industries because there isn't that ecosystem for them. But also there is a kind of generational fear of failure that I see in the students in their coursework. And it's one of the kind of concerns I have about education in the game space, is that they're in it for the marks, right? And they're in it for that kind of thing, which then when they get into industry, they're in it for safety and security. And there isn't that kind of experimental pushing boundaries. And any young industry, especially an arts-based one, needs that, like, we're challenging, we're trying new things, we're exploring, we're experimenting. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that you're pointing that out as a major gap. But there is also a fear of kind of the instability in the country and not having a job there. But I did want to bring it back to, you said one of the reasons you got into this was kind of telling African stories. And I'm curious, what is the value for you there? And why is it such an important push in what you're doing now? And part of why I'm bringing it up is you mentioned there aren't a lot of big studios, but our most successful one, Free Lives, has produced IP that is not South African at all. I mean, if you didn't know that Free Lives was South African, you may as well assume they're kids from California or something, right? So for you, as one of your agendas, why is that something you're so interested in?
Yeah, I mean, we debate this a lot in the office. We debate this a lot in the industry. What is an African game? And I think for me, there's a couple of layers there to be unpacked. And I think firstly, for me, if Africans are making a product of whatever aesthetic, that's secondary to me, right? So Free Lives making the games that they're making, I'm perfectly fine with the type of games they make because they are African people and African talent showing the world we can produce quality. Aesthetics is up to each individual who runs a studio to figure out and determine for themselves what matters with the aesthetic of their games. And for me right now, that debate is not material, right? What is material is Africans being involved in the production of games. And when that happens, you will get Africans who are infusing their lived experience in the creative process. And when anyone who is creative brings in their lived experience, the product is going to be unique, right? And what is missing in the industry globally is this point, which is you just don't have enough Africans making this thing. And if you don't have enough Africans making this thing, the world is missing out on our lived experience, is missing out on our cultural experience, is missing out on our understanding of stories. We are a continent rich with stories, folklore, and if people are given the chance, they will create some games, maybe like a Nyama Cop, that is heavily African in aesthetic, or they could create a game like a Free Lives game, which is not, quote unquote, aesthetically African, right? But the lived experiences will inform the output, and the output will be unique. And that's my thesis. That's my, I believe that we will create special products by virtue of just involving people who are excluded. And when we include people who are excluded, they think differently. They see life differently. They've experienced life differently. when you then put tools in front of them to make a product, when you put support, resources, infrastructure, and you say, you've got time, which is a big problem. I am always telling the team, my job is to buy you time, right? Because when you are making this very creative product and you are rushing because your runway is running out in 5 months, in 6 months, I don't think you'll create your best work, because that type of pressure might, some people become diamonds through that pressure. Some people just crumble through the pressure. And I don't know how we solve the issue of time, right? But that's why it's important for me. I think for me, we need to also play a role in making the products for everybody else to play and enjoy. And I would certainly love if those products are telling our story, whatever the story is. You know, there are many stories. And I don't want us to get into a debate about whether a Free Lives game should be more South African aesthetically. I don't think that matters.
Yeah.
We need Free Lives making more games.
Yeah, and getting those people from that junior position to that intermediate to that senior position.
100%.
Yeah.
We need people from Free Lives, when they get to a comfortable level with skill financially, to go start their own businesses, right? So that they can then absorb the talent that is junior and mentor them and work with them, and they create additional studios. And this is how the industry morphs into, something that we never anticipated. That's the hope. But again, it's going to take time. We have to accept that it will take time. And I hope in that time, we can convince, our government to support the industry. We can convince private companies interested in talent development on our continent to come and invest, right? For the long term, and it makes business sense. Everybody walks away richer, financially too, because the products that we make, if we make a lot of them, we only need one hit. One hit will pay for all the things that didn't work out. And so we need, investment that is patient, that understands that this is a big risk. We are not going to make this seem like a safe bet. It is not a safe bet making games. It's high risk. But I come from a finance background, and high risk is high reward, right? If you don't take the big bets, you are not going to get the big checks at the end, right? And so the idea is to tell the business case, the business story, and it is a business, to investors with capital to invest in this space, to create another Tencent, to create an Electronic Arts, and all the major big gaming companies in the world that are now listed in stock markets. We can do that too. I have no doubt about it. We can do that too. In fact, I think that's what we are building. So any investor watching this right now, reach out and we will gladly accept your capital and we'll give you your return in due course.
Well, Raymond, you and I we come from a township. We come from townships. We are representing. And I want you maybe, how you touch on how do we make sure in scaling up the sector, how do we make sure that we don't leave behind that young boy, young girl who is in Soweto, Alex, Tembisa, and I'm sure, not everyone has to know. You know how you and I met. There's someone who's not lucky as me, who is at the right place, at the right table, that child in the township.
Sure. It's a big question. It's a difficult question. It requires intentionality. It requires, leadership that understands why people should not be left behind. And oftentimes people are left behind for maybe 2 or 3 main reasons. The first reason, the obvious reason, could just be that there's a lack of understanding, appreciation that there is talent in townships too. And just because someone didn't get the opportunity to go to Wits University and study and couldn't afford to pay the fees that, these educational institutions charge, just because someone doesn't have that background does not make them talentless, right? So it takes very good leadership to understand that. And once you understand that, then you ask the following question, which is, okay, how do we then absorb this talent that doesn't have the privilege of getting the qualifications that maybe the industry deems as valid? And by the way, I've appreciated that, there are different types of leaders in the industry, just like with any industry in the world, where some people actually don't care about your educational qualifications. They care about your portfolio. They care about what you can do, not what you went to school and, the papers or the certificates. And this is not to diss education. I think there's a place for education in the world, in our country. And, numbers don't lie. The data tells us that someone with an educational qualification is more likely to get a job than someone without it. So education is still crucial for young people. And it's a great place to network and, learn a lot of social skills that are good in business. That's the first part. But people without the education needs people who will take a chance on them. So what is required for people to take a chance on people who are excluded? I think resources. If you are struggling as an entrepreneur and you're fighting for your survival as an entrepreneur, you are not going to be in the right state of mind to take a risk on people that still require lots of training, lots of investment, So to ensure, Bandile, that we do not leave people behind, I think 2 things need to be true. 1, leaders who will take a chance on people without the qualifications, or even with the qualifications. It shouldn't matter where you come from, whether you come from a township or not. It shouldn't really matter, but we know it does. And how do we know it does? Because depending on where this young person is going to work, they might need to take taxis, transport fare. And so this requires money, right? You need to have money in the pocket to give someone a chance, right? So maybe we need to rethink how we could have people participate where they are. But to get people to participate where they are, we need internet access, right?
Yes.
If you don't have internet access, how are you going to be connected? And these are a whole lot of infrastructural barriers. If you have internet, you need a laptop. So where are you supposed to get this laptop from? Again, it's an issue of resources, which then leads to the second thing that then needs to be true. You need leaders with access to resources that are then willing to take a chance on people who are excluded and bring them to the fore. So that question is not an easy question to answer. It can't be solved by one person. It's multi-layered. It requires, people coming and deciding what matters. I am a big proponent of not leaving anyone behind. But then at the same time, I understand I operate in an environment with constraints, right? And these constraints are important because If they are removed, I can do a lot more. But if I'm still constrained, that's a challenge. So it's every entrepreneur's biggest nightmare, trying to do more with limited resources, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I think so. So you're talking about leadership, and you're talking about the kind of infrastructure. The other thing, Bandile, for that I think is building the right communities, because one of the problems, and I've been in this industry since 2012, I've seen is so much gatekeeping around who is allowed in the door, why they're allowed in the door, and and a lot of it's like, oh, you haven't played this game, you're such an idiot, why would I let you into my space? But actually, that's not the kind of experience of the people you're talking about who haven't had a PC their whole life. They haven't played those kinds of games, but that doesn't mean their lived experience or their understanding of what play is and games is shouldn't be allowed in the door. And for me, I'm interested in building communities, and I think we're getting there in some spaces, totally failing in others. But it's infrastructure, but then also community to say, hey, it's okay. You're part of this. You're making games. You're doing cool stuff. Come join us. So I think that's another aspect that really needs to be pushed, is allowing and building this inclusive community.
It's gatekeeping, man.
Yeah.
What a topic. That requires an episode of its own.
Yeah, the gatekeeping episode.
And I actually love what you are saying, Kieren, and based on what Raymond was saying in terms of how do we try and figure out how can we work together, the collaboration part of things. Like, I mean, I'm sure the guys have already done it when it comes to Afri Games Consortium, where they invite each other and approach government. I think it's a very valid and most important thing that we need to learn in this country. How do we learn to work together?
Yeah.
How do we build the system together, not compete with one another? Any thoughts from, like, I mean, as we wrap up, reflection on what Raymond has talked about?
Yeah, I mean, Ray, it's always great to talk to you. And, I mean, one of the things you're mentioning, gatekeeping here, what I've seen, because I've been in the education space and in the kind of creative, and I'm really appreciating the way that business and the way that kind of communication with government and communication and understanding we're building an industry, not just a kind of creative scene. It has to be both. It has to be a space where it's art and it's flourishing, but it has to be a space where it's business and it's flourishing. So it's really great to hear those kinds of comments. And it's really great that we have a chartered accountant who's a leader in the games industry. For years it's been like the dev's the leader or the art guy's the leader of the creative space. But, Ray, you are a leader in the game space now, and it's really great to have other voices come in and experience that. So thanks for sharing that with us.
No, thank you. And I hope that people who are really interested in working in this space, who might not come from a traditional developer or art background, can consider joining us, because I think to make this thing successful, to build this industry, it takes a whole lot of different skill sets. For sure, we need developers coding the games. We need the artist creating beautiful aesthetics and, really appealing pieces of work. At the same time, we need to ask ourselves, how is this game going to sell?
Yeah.
Right? So you need a lot of people who come from marketing backgrounds. We need lawyers in the industry because, especially now in the age of AI, with the copyright amendment bill, there's a lot of challenges that need to be solved in terms of what is intellectual property, who owns intellectual property, whose intellectual property is being used by someone else to generate new intellectual property. So we need lawyers to come help us figure these things out. Certainly need finance people to help us figure out how do we create financial instruments. And this is, by the way, work that my team and I are currently thinking around and working to solve, which is we are designing a social impact bond. And we want to create a social impact bond that can return financial return to investors of the bond, but then at the same time can create a lot of impact and create, outcomes that are non-financial, but in our industry, in our country, in our continent are important. Outcomes like employment, outcomes like skills development, outcomes like cultural preservation, because it's important that we preserve our cultures. And games could help us preserve our cultures, right? And then at the same time, ensure that the products that are being built are commercially successful. That is important too, right? And that at the same time, we create sustainable businesses that can create multiple games. So this is work that for us is important. And anyone watching who is interested in helping us create this, financial instrument that I think would benefit the industry, I'm hoping you can reach out and let's talk about it and exchange ideas.
Great.
Thank you. As you heard today, we have the talent, we have the energy. What is left is for us to help grow this industry. We need everyone to support this industry, to help grow the movement. Please, if you are watching, don't forget to subscribe, share it with your network, and also I'd like to take this opportunity and say thank you, give the big ups to Kute Institute for the support and everything that they are doing in order to grow this gaming industry in the country. Thank you very much. Until next time, keep pressing Start Mzansi. Thank you.